everybody. Karen Roby here with Lance Whitney for Tech Republic. And Lance, no secret that we all dislike passwords, trying to remember them, keeping track of them. Lance, it can be very difficult. It's a struggle, for people to keep up with their passwords. We're still hearing about people who have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as their password, even after all of these years and all of the warnings that have been given. But when it comes to organizations, securing these passwords and making sure employees are doing what they need to do, that too is a struggle, and some real issues can come out of this when we have vulnerable passwords.
Right, Karen. So the story I did here was based on a survey that was conducted by LastPass, which is a password manager, and they wanted to find out from companies, both from IT and security people and from employees, what are some of the challenges of maintaining and trying to rely on passwords. And as you said, we all hate passwords. They're a necessary evil at this point. Nobody likes having to juggle different passwords. There's definitely a lot of catch-22s involved in this, but specifically some of the things that they found in the survey, they were asked to talk about some of the largest challenges as far as using passwords. And from an IT or security standpoint, the biggest challenge was users who forget their passwords. So certainly help desks and IT support people, they have to spend a lot of time on password management, just in terms of people who forget their passwords and need to have their passwords reset. Another challenge that they run into is employees who will use the same password across multiple sites, multiple applications. That certainly poses security risks, because if the password is obtained or stolen for one site, then an attacker could potentially gain access to other sites or other applications. So they did another challenge that the IT people did speak about was certainly the time involved in password management. The survey found that on average, IT personnel spend about 4.5 hours per week on just managing user passwords because of these different challenges. A few other drawbacks that they mentioned as far as relying on passwords is the cost of password management, as well as lost or stolen passwords, which can definitely put individuals as well as organizations at risk. And then finally, some of the other challenges they mentioned are, of course, using weak passwords. Again, we've got that catch-22 whereby what does a user do? What does an employee do in terms of having to manage and maintain multiple passwords? If they try to create a secure and complex password for every site or every application, there's no way humanly that they can remember and juggle all of those. So what they end up doing is they end up creating weak passwords or using the same password across multiple instances, and then that defeats part of the purpose of having a password. They also found that when they surveyed employees, they found that, of course, they have their own set of challenges and obstacles as far as dealing with passwords. So certainly the biggest one is just having to manage and maintain multiple passwords across different sites and different systems. Another one is the requirement that many organizations have to reset their passwords. So each time an employee gets a notification that they have to reset their password to something new, that can certainly be a major pain in the neck. And then certainly another one I think we can all identify with this one is having to type long and complex passwords. Certainly doing this on a keyboard is bad enough, but if you're having to type a long complex password on a mobile phone, and again, I think we've all been through that aggravation, it's just so frustrating and so difficult. So those are some of the key challenges that the survey uncovered.
Yeah, and Lance, there are alternatives, of course, and we've talked about them before. What are some of those, and some that are recommended that companies really need to be looking into to offering?
Sure. So based on the survey results, LastPass came up with three passwordless methods of authentication that can either replace or supplement passwords. So one of them is biometric authentication. And this just simply refers to anything like facial recognition, fingerprint recognition, that sort of thing, where you're using something personal about yourself to authenticate your account or authenticate your sign in beyond having to rely on a password. And obviously, all of us who use mobile phones, iPhones or Android phones, should be familiar with those methods of authentication, whether you have Face ID or Touch ID on an iPhone, or facial recognition or fingerprint sensors on an Android device. Those can certainly be a time saver, so that we're not juggling passwords to every time we need to sign into something. A second method that they talked about here is something called single sign-on. And this is something that an organization would typically implement internally. And what this simply means is that you have a single set of credentials, a username and a password that you use from the get-go to sign in to your organization's network or your organization's system. And then that authentication carries you forward through any other applications or sites or information that you need to access. So you're not constantly having to remember and enter different sets of credentials for each piece of information that you need to access. And then a third method that they mentioned here in the report is something called federated identity. This is similar in concept to single sign-on, although it's implemented somewhat differently. But what this means too is that you have a single means of authentication to gain access to your business's network or services, and then that carries you through. So that will work continually when you start to access different sites, different applications, even different networks. So you're only having to remember and enter that one type of authentication, and that carries you along through everything else.
And talk a little bit about, or expand on those, Lance, in terms of the benefits of some of these passwordless options. And obviously, nothing is perfect too. Some drawbacks to those as well.
Sure. Yeah. So there are some definite advantages and benefits. And of course, like with anything, there are some definite downsides. So some of the benefits that they talked about here, obviously, is that these passwordless methods provide a much quicker means of authentication. It means much fewer passwords for an employee to have to remember and juggle. It also offers more streamlined access, more seamless access to the different applications and different pieces of content and data that an employee may need to access throughout the day. And then another one is not having to update passwords as often. And then also not worrying as much about password breaches because you're not as reliant on passwords. So those are some of the pluses and benefits to this. But of course, some of the obstacles would be the biggest challenge that the survey mentioned definitely is the initial financial investment to move or to migrate from a password based environment to a passwordless based environment, whether it's using biometric authentication or something like single sign-on. That can be, depending on the size of the organization, that can certainly be a tremendous financial investment from the outset. Obviously, aside from the financial burden, there's also the time and resources and work involved in migrating to something like this. A couple other things they mentioned, though, would be the fact that people don't always like change. As much as we hate passwords, we're kind of used to them. So any type of change from that, even if it's a change for the positive, can certainly disrupt our ease of working and our methods of working. So those are definitely some of the, some of the initial obstacles that would be involved with this. And then because of some of those obstacles, the report from LastPass concluded by saying that certainly passwords, as much as we'd like them to, are not going away anytime soon. Even though we're working on these different forms of authentication, passwords are still going to be around for quite some time to come. So the interim solution, and certainly this is no surprise coming from LastPass, the interim solution is to use a password manager. But certainly I would definitely agree with that in lieu of having other convenient methods and other means of juggling secure and complex passwords. A password manager is still your best bet at this point because it takes a lot of the burden away from those various challenges. And the good thing is that password managers are available both for individuals if you're working and using technology at home, and they're also available on a corporate or a business level as something that an organization can implement throughout the ranks. So that's probably your best bet until some of these other authentication methods are more pervasive.
Yeah, that I think it definitely helps. I mean, I know it has helped me significantly to have, the manager there. And it's unfortunate. We wish we could just say, okay, we're done with passwords. That's it. We don't have to worry about them ever again, but they're still here.
Yeah,
Just the way it is. All right, Lance.
that,
Well, much more information on that study. What you need to know can all be found, of course, on Tech Republic. And we hope you will all check it out there. Thanks for watching.